Good evening. Welcome to the first session of our patient education programme for 2025, hosted by Hashir International Specialist Clinics and Research Institute for Misophonia, Tinnitus and Hyperacusis. Hashir International is a multidisciplinary organisation that aims to help you with assessment and management of your misophonia, tinnitus or hyperacusis. Each month we will be exploring a different topic within sound sensitivity, aiming to give you a broader knowledge and understanding of these conditions. My name is Joanna Barker and I'm your host for these sessions. I have been an audiologist for the last 12 years and I'm a specialist in noise sensitivity. Sound sensitivities are my passion and I'm really excited to bring these live sessions to you. Today, we are joined by Emani Dotch, a fourth-year Ph.D. candidate, fellow and Ceres Scholar in the Department of Informatics at the University of California. Emani focuses on investigating how technology can be designed to support the needs of neurodiverse populations. She is sharing with us a presentation on accessibility through awareness of noise sensitivity experiences. In this talk, she'll be discussing with us the background on noise sensitivity as experienced by neurodivergent populations, current research practices for supporting within the field of human-computer interaction, and a review of her work exploring technology designed to support noise sensitivity awareness. There will be the opportunity to ask questions after the presentation, so please feel free to post these through the chat function. Thank you so much, Emani, for joining us. I will now hand over to you.
Thanks, Joanna. This is a super exciting experience. So give me 1 second and I will share my screen. Okay, looks like we're good to go. So hello, everyone, and welcome to this talk this morning where we'll be talking about accessibility through awareness of noise sensitivity experiences. As Joanna said, my name is Emani. I am a fourth-year Ph.D. candidate at the University of California, Irvine. And as a candidate, I am a researcher and advocate that conducts research at the intersection of human-computer interaction, accessibility, personal and health informatics, and assistive technology. You don't have to understand what any of those phrases mean to understand this talk, but it just gives you an idea of like where my work falls. And so I do this work to empower people and scholars to take control of the journey they have with various health conditions and to help them become more knowledgeable about what this can look like. So in particular, I design and develop technology for people with neurodevelopmental conditions such as autism and ADHD and evaluate how these systems can support and empower them in their daily lives. So my current research looks into supporting people with noise sensitivity by co-creating technology to facilitate awareness and collaboration to manage and regulate this condition. And so in today's talk, I'll share a bit of my motivations of why I'm doing this research, provide some background about noise sensitivity with a particular context around the neurodivergent population, some current approaches, and then review my current research that's going towards my dissertation. And so as Joanna said, we will have a chance to have some questions and answer them to the best of my ability. So definitely be thinking about some questions you may have as I go through this talk. So why am I doing what I'm doing? So on your screen, you're going to see 3 wonderful humans. All of them are family members of mine. First is my little brother Kadir, and then my cousins Amron and Joseph. All 3 of them are autistic and experience some level of noise sensitivity. But I didn't really understand what autism or noise sensitivity meant. Growing up, I encountered Amron and Joseph a lot. As they were kids, I'm older than them, so I would see them wearing headphones at family functions or seeing that certain environments were intolerable or just not fun to be in due to how noisy an environment can be. But this condition start to hit a little closer to home for me when my little brother Kadir was diagnosed with autism, and I would see that certain sounds were a bit problematic for him. And there's one instance in particular that was, I would say, is kind of like that pivotal moment for me. Our family was out to dinner one night, and it was the end of the dinner, and we all had our takeout boxes. And I was closing the lid on my box, and it was a styrofoam takeout box. And when I closed it, it made a squeaking noise. And my little brother just yelled, "Stop making that noise!" And I was a little thrown off because I was like, "Why are you yelling? We're in a restaurant. What just happened?" But ultimately, it made me think that that's like an uncommon reaction to me closing a box. And so as he got older, he was able to articulate a little bit more clearly that this sound is too loud or this is hurting my ears. And so from my brother Kandir's experiences and my cousins Amron and Joseph experiences, I just wanted to know just how widespread is this experience of noise sensitivity, especially when we're thinking about people who have autism or ADHD. And so let's kind of dig into some background information. So noise sensitivity can be described as one or a mixture of any of the four following conditions. There's hyperacusis, misophonia, tinnitus, and phonophobia. Phonophobia kind of falls as a sub-condition of misophonia. And so hyperacusis is described as the perception of everyday sounds as being excessively loud and or painful. So for example, there's been reports of people being able to hear the sounds of a light bulb buzzing or the hum of a refrigerator, and it seems excessively loud as you hearing my voice right now. And it can be even painful for some people. So that's how we think about hyperacusis and what you can think about as I use this term throughout. And then there's tinnitus, which is the perception of sound and the absence of sound. So some people have explained it as a persistent ringing in the ear. And maybe you've even had a moment where your ears just started ringing, but there's no loud, like no sounds are coming into your ears. So that is a way for you to kind of understand and conceptualize what tinnitus is. And then we have misophonia, which is described as an extreme aversion to specific sounds, typically resulting in seemingly abrupt and negative emotions and behaviors. So an example can include an aversion to someone chewing or smacking their mouths or paper ripping or even a baby crying. And so as you're thinking about misophonia, you may think, oh, these are common sounds. Imagine just how, if someone has misophonia, how an environment can become inaccessible if they're constantly being around paper ripping or a baby crying. And I'm thinking about restaurants or school settings and places that are frequented by younger children where you're more likely to hear these sounds on a day-to-day occurrence. And so finally, we have phonophobia, which is a phobia or a fear of specific sounds. And so for the purpose of this presentation and the scope of my research, I'll mainly be talking about hyperacusis and misophonia when I use the word noise sensitivity. So within the neurodivergent population, over 50% of neurodivergent people, so people with autism or ADHD, have experience of noise sensitivity. And then 20% of the world's population also experiences noise sensitivity. So we see that it's more prevalent when we think about neurodivergent populations and wanting to support them. And so current approaches for supporting noise sensitivity is typically framed within a medical, societal, or a technological approach for supporting. And so when we think about the medical approach, we typically think about methods of rehabilitation, desensitization, and the neurological origins of noise sensitivity. Yet many of these approaches have either not been proven to have lasting impacts, or when we're thinking about it in the terms of the neurodivergent population, there's a shift of wanting to not just think about the medical causes of noise sensitivity, but what are other factors that are contributing to this person experiencing noise sensitivity. And then when we think about the proof of, are these methods long lasting? If I go through this rehabilitation therapy or this desensitization therapy, will I be healed of my noise sensitivity? The answer is we don't know. There aren't a lot of studies that say definitely that this is a solution. So typically, medical professionals will also recommend that people use ear protection devices such as headphones, earplugs, or even earmuffs to support their noise sensitivity experiences. And so then we think about the societal approaches. These are solutions that are more outward facing, for the public itself. And so we see the implementation or creation of sensory rooms or quiet hours or sensory-friendly zones in public spaces. And so when I talk about this, I'm thinking about if you're going to a shopping store, they may have quiet hours where there's low stimulants, where they're not playing music over the intercom, or the lights may be a little bit more dim, or there's less people to minimize how loud and congested the shopping center may be. And then more particularly, I'm thinking about the Georgia Aquarium in the United States, where they have sensory-friendly zones that are a little bit pushed back from the typical viewings of the animals, so that if someone has sensory sensitivities, they can have a low stimulating environment where they can still engage in the aquarium activities. So when we're thinking about these, they seem very helpful and supportive of neurodivergent people and people who have noise sensitivity. However, there's a limited adoption of such practices, especially as few people understand or are aware that, one, noise sensitivity exists, or how it impacts neurodivergent people. And if we're thinking about children, how is this impacting a child's development? And so finally, we think about the technological approaches, which usually include digital and mobile health interventions delivered via devices such as phones, tablets, and smartwatches. So this is the approach I primarily take with my research, while also considering the medical and societal implications of my work. And so some digital and mobile applications that are commercially available to support managing noise sensitivity include the Calm app, My Noise, and Headspace. More recently, we also see Samsung has released an app called Unfear that specifically targets noise sensitivity for autistic individuals. However, with this app, it's primarily siloed within Spain and Spanish-speaking individuals. And then we also see Apple trying to support noise awareness through their Noise app and noise cancellation features in their devices. And so we see there's commercially available products that we can use. Yet, many of these tools, as I mentioned and reported elsewhere, often fall short of meeting the complex needs of people with noise sensitivity, especially if we think about neurodivergent and children that are primarily using these tools, mainly because they weren't designed with noise sensitivity or people with noise sensitivity in mind. Those have just been tools that people with noise sensitivity have found as helpful, but they weren't necessarily made to cater towards their needs. Additionally, current solutions face several key other limitations. Prohibitive costs. The products may cost too much, therefore they're hidden behind a paywall. Then there's the issue of a lack of contextual awareness for the specific noise triggers and a failure to account for the social and personal impacts that noise sensitivity has for people who experience it. And then further, as we think about ear protection devices, they're frequently inadequate, either blocking too much sound and causing isolation for the person, or not blocking enough sound for it to provide meaningful release for the person wearing them. These challenges are then further complicated when individuals experience co-occurring conditions such as autism, ADHD, anxiety, or they may have had a stroke and concussion that has led to them having noise sensitivity. So as we think about all these challenges with current solutions, it makes it clear and essential that we need to develop more nuanced and accessible solutions for people with noise sensitivity. And so this is where my research comes in. So I try to address some of these challenges through the design, development, and evaluation of digital health interventions to support people with noise sensitivity. So in particular, I'm looking at how can we design mobile health interventions to support people with noise sensitivity. So to begin, as I've mentioned, noise sensitivity is a challenge for many people, but especially prevalent amongst individuals with autism and ADHD. However, within the field of human-computer interaction, there's not much work done to understand these experiences and how technology can potentially support people with noise sensitivity. So through my work, I'm interested in answering the following 3 questions. First, how do people with noise sensitivity make sense of their condition and the related challenges they experience? So they have this condition. How are they grappling with the implications of having it? How are they dealing with school? How are they dealing with work? How are they navigating their day-to-day lives? And how is it impacting those things? And then next, how do people with noise sensitivity and their allies become aware of and cope with this condition? So I know I have this condition. How do other people then become aware that I have this condition? And how am I managing it? What tools and strategies and resources do I have access to help with my noise sensitivity? And then lastly, how can technology be designed to facilitate awareness of and support for people with noise sensitivity in their care networks? And so through this talk, I'll kind of hit on different projects that I'm doing that addresses these questions. And so since I'm primarily interested in autistic people's experiences of noise sensitivity, I analyzed data from 2 online communities for autistic people to answer my first research question. So how do people make sense of their noise sensitivity and the related challenges they experience? My analysis revealed that people in the communities engaged in collaborative sense-making by sharing their experiences of noise sensitivity. This included sharing their personal triggers, moments of sensory overload and meltdowns, and how this condition impacted their work, school, and social lives. And so by sharing this, it created a community of support and that they weren't necessarily getting in the real world from other people. And then they also shared how they manage their noise sensitivity by means of noise reduction methods, avoiding places and triggers, and the search for creation of autism/sensory friendly spaces. So again, we see a community depending on one another to trade off, well, this method helped me, maybe it will help you, or I didn't find this resource helpful, what is another resource? So we see an exchange of resources and information and collaboration to make sense of this condition within an online space, which is speaking to a larger issue of maybe these spaces aren't in place beyond the online communities. And so in addition to learning about experiences of noise sensitivity, related challenges, and how autistic people manage their condition, this work also revealed that there are a number of societal barriers and challenges that impacts the agency of autistic people regarding their noise sensitivity, which contributes to an inaccessible environment. And it further makes us think a little bit deeper about these things as we consider autistic children or non-autistic children who may be experiencing noise sensitivity and the agency they possess. And so in particular, there are tensions between societal norms and personal needs. For example, autistic people prefer to cope with their noise sensitivity in ways that make sense to them and are comfortable to them, but it may not be what society deems as quote unquote normal behaviors or socially acceptable. So they typically had to choose between appearing normal to avoid being stigmatized or feeling free to use coping strategies such as their headphones and engaging in self-stimulating behaviors, thereby risking opportunities of being stigmatized or prejudiced due to their condition. Additionally, human relationships were shown to restrict the agency of autistic people who are noise sensitive. This was seen when family members invalidated their experiences and restricted how they could cope. So for instance, family members saying, oh, that doesn't really hurt you, or there's no way that can be impacting you. And so by invalidating those experiences, it made it seem like what they were feeling wasn't real, and thereby they didn't have the resources or the tools they needed to cope in those moments. It's also seen by employers and schools failing to provide necessary accommodations. Again, noise sensitivity is typically an invisible condition. So if there's no knowledge about it, but you ask for the accommodations, you're less likely to get it unless you disclose that you have that condition. And that's where we see the third thing, when autistic people fear disclosing their autism due to stigmas and repercussions they may face in the school and the workplace. So in order to receive accommodations at work and in school, they had to out themselves, regardless of wanting to or not. And so in addition to those findings, during the analysis of the online communities, I also found that despite the community being for autistic people only, there were non-autistic people engaging in these spaces, trying to make sense of their noise sensitivity because they knew that it was an experience by autistic people. And so to further understand this experience more generally, I then opened up my search from not just neurodivergent populations, but the population in general to include anybody who's experiencing noise sensitivity, and conducted interviews to dig a little bit deeper into some of the things that I saw in the online community, predominantly issues of agency, things about awareness and how people are managing their condition. And so the second study aims to understand more generally, how do people with noise sensitivity and their allies become aware of, manage, and regulate this condition. So I interviewed people with noise sensitivity and caregivers to discuss how they became aware of their noise sensitivity and what practices and methods they enacted to manage and regulate the condition. So from these interviews, I learned that people manage and regulate noise sensitivity based on three types of awareness. The first is self-awareness, in which the person with noise sensitivity becomes aware of their noise sensitivity or triggers that causes their noise sensitivity to flare. And then they enacted some type of strategies to support themselves. The next is others awareness, where someone other than the person with noise sensitivity became aware of the condition or its triggers and enacted strategies on behalf of the person. So this would happen either with the consent of the noise sensitive person or outside of the consent of the noise sensitive person. And so then finally, I identified this concept of joint awareness, in which we see both the person with noise sensitivity and someone else coming together and having a joint awareness of the condition that exists as triggers, and then working together to manage or regulate their noise sensitivity experiences. And so once awareness was found out or became a thing, different strategies were enacted depending on who holds the awareness. So for example, strategies under self-awareness included sound blocking and masking, as well as self-stimulating behaviors. So sound blocking and masking could include using headphones or ear protection devices to either completely block out sounds or just to mask a sound by listening to music or listening to an audiobook or some sound that is more calming and acceptable to the person, to block out or mask sounds that were aversive or causing pain for that person. And then when we see others that were aware, they responded by adapting the environment around the person with noise sensitivity, avoiding the locations or sounds, or creating or using toolboxes and compromise of various regulation strategies. So adapting the environment may include putting sound insulation in a particular part of that house where that person is going to be most often. Or if it's a day after school and the kids are in the living room watching TV, then there's not a TV on in the bedroom, or there's not a radio on somewhere that's going to cause more noise in that environment. So that's why we see the adapting of different environments for people with noise sensitivity. Or they'll just outright avoid a location. I had someone say, I don't take my kids to Disney World because I know they're going to encounter so much noise that it's going to be intolerable for them to actually enjoy their experiences at Disney. And then lastly, the toolboxes was where parents or family members would create even like a jar with sticky notes that says, if you're stressed, pull something out and engage in that activity. So that may be going on a walk, journaling how you're feeling, doing some breathing exercises, different strategies to help them calm down in that moment. So that's where we see the creation of regulation toolboxes. And then finally, under joint awareness, we see strategies that include both of the things from self-awareness and others awareness, but also this act of information sharing and collaboration. So they typically would be either the person who has more sensitivity or a caregiver telling the other person that, hey, this is my condition, or this environment is too much, or this sound is triggering, or we can't go to McDonald's for lunch because there's always going to be somebody in there crying, or there's going to be something happening in that environment that's too overwhelming for me. And then at that point, they work together to find alternative plans to work around the trigger or the noise sensitivity condition. And so from these two studies and the research at the intersection of noise sensitivity, technology and sensory sensitivities, and health management, I gather that to effectively support people with noise sensitivity, there must be one, awareness that the condition exists and what are particular triggers for a person. This means not just awareness for the person who has a condition, but a family member, friends, educators, and even the general public. And then once there's awareness, support requires a collaborative effort. Many approaches so far puts a lot of the responsibility on the person with noise sensitivity to manage their condition, to regulate their behaviors, to tell other people what's going on. And that creates a lot of fatigue for the person with noise sensitivity to have to always figure it out. But if we take a collaborative approach, this can minimize potentially triggering environments and lead to others being more informed and proactive in how they can support people with noise sensitivity. And so finally, there's a need for assistive technologies that are designed to support this population, their care networks, and foster accessible spaces. And so based on my former studies and through a series of design workshops with people with noise sensitivity and their allies, I've established 4 principles that should guide how we think about the design of technology to facilitate this awareness and collaboration between people with noise sensitivity and those around them. So the first is that assistive technology should provide multimodal feedback. This may look like using various forms of feedback, such as visual aids, haptic feedback, such as like how your phone may vibrate or alert when you're using it or wearing it, linguistics, so verbal cues and information, etc., to communicate information about the noise level, potential triggers of an environment, and other relevant contextual information. Second, assistive technology should allow flexibility in management and regulation. For example, this may look like tracking contextual information with suggested management and regulation strategies tailored to a given context. So this means more personalized approaches and maybe even the integration of artificial intelligence to help track and provide in-time support given a particular context. And then third, assistive tech should support sound regulation. This can include the use of systems that monitor noise in environments and notifies responsible parties to regulate the noise and/or for the person with noise sensitivity to deploy coping strategies as needed. So this may look like, let's say if you're in a classroom, having a traffic light system where green means the noise is good, yellow means the noise is moderate, or red or orange means it's too loud. And then based off of that, a notification is sent to the teacher to let her know if the classroom needs to be regulated so that it becomes more quiet and accessible for someone who may have noise sensitivity. Such an approach takes the responsibility away from the person with noise sensitivity to have to tell the teacher, hey, it's too loud, but it makes other people become aware of just how they may be impacting the noise level in an environment. And then finally, assistive technology should be designed to prioritize user autonomy and minimize user burden. This means that systems should support people with noise sensitivity's preferred methods of regulating while also fostering awareness, which can be done through sound regulation practices as mentioned in step number 3. And so with those design principles in mind, I began to answer my third research question. How can technology be designed to facilitate awareness and support amongst people with noise sensitivity in their care networks? So through 8 design workshops and many prototypes, I've been working with people with noise sensitivity in Southern California to understand how can technology support their needs. Taking insights from the design workshops and all of the formative studies I've done so far, I've worked with developers in creating an app that we're calling Audio Buddy. Audio Buddy incorporates the 4 design principles and offers emotional awareness and regulation through check-ins, so they can check how am I feeling at a given moment, and then is it the noise that's contributing this, or is there something else? And then they can decide how to move to change things based off of that. It also offers self-regulation practices to engage in coping activities. So again, if I'm feeling anxious or I'm stressed or I'm in pain due to a noise, I have some tools that I can use. Because one of the things we noticed was that while some people had coping strategies, other people didn't. It was more so I react because I don't know what I can do in a moment, or I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what I can do in a moment. So by having these regulation strategies in their hand, it can help them self-regulate in a moment. And then the app allows collaboration between people with noise sensitivity and their ally through a notification and tracking system that enables information sharing and communication about noise sensitivity experiences. This app is then paired with smartwatch-centric functions that track noise levels, heart rate, and other relevant data to help people with noise sensitivity and those around them remain aware and informed about noise sensitive experiences and relevant contextual information to help guide how they deal with and manage their condition. So Audio Buddy is in its infancy, but in the coming months, I will be evaluating the potential of this app to support people with noise sensitivity. And so based on that pilot, I will redesign and retest the app through many cycles until we have something that best supports this community through user feedbacks and interviews. Overall, though, I do believe it can be an effective tool and starting point as we strive to promote more accessibility through the awareness of noise sensitivity experiences for people with noise sensitivity. So with that, I'd like to thank Joanna for hosting this talk and all of you for listening. If you'd like to learn more about the work I'm doing, feel free to scan the QR code on your screen and it'll take you to my website where you can find articles that I've published about this work. And if you have any questions or thoughts or questions and comments and concerns, etc., feel free to let me know and I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you so much, Marnie. That's brilliant. If we can leave that screen up just for a second, just in case anybody does want to take a picture of the QR code, and then we'll take it down in just a moment. And as Imani said, if you would like to ask her a question, please pop it in the chat function, and I can see if Imani can answer that. But I just want to thank you because that was really interesting. And it's really exciting as well to know that this is out there and hopefully is. Do you feel that it would, if once you've completed your research and if you release the app, would it be available sort of like just in America, or would it be able to come across to different countries as well?
Yeah, so I will have to like do a lot of background work and figure out how does that stuff fully work. But my ideal circumstance would be that this would be a tool that's accessible to not just to people in the US, but anywhere that has access to app stores. Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges now is that a lot of the work that's being done is siloed in different communities, but this is a condition that's widespread. So if we can get tools that are accessible to many people and that's scalable, we can see some drastic changes within noise sensitivity support for people with this condition.
Amazing. That's brilliant. Can I get you to take that screen down now, Imani? Would that be okay? Thank
Absolutely.
you. So we've just had a couple of questions. We've got one from M Page. I love your research. Thank you for sharing. I'm wondering how the app would help if it's only certain sounds that trigger as opposed to general noise level.
So how would it work if it's triggering specific sounds and not just general? So that is something that we're working on integrating as well, because right now it is just general noise levels. But through the interviews and the design workshops and whatnot, we know that there are certain sounds that are triggering. And so it's a matter of coding in and developing a system that has sound recognition features that if a certain sound is detected, then there's a notification that's sent that supports that person in that moment. But also in that regard, after like, let's say you've used this app for, I don't know, a couple months, a goal of ours is to integrate artificial intelligence capabilities to where, let's say if you're at school, it's 12 o'clock and you're in the lunchroom, there's always this particular sound. The bell always dings at this particular sound. Before that happens, the app will proactively provide you with some type of tools and strategies to help them before they get into that environment and they're experiencing a triggering moment. So to answer your question, the goal is to implement more sound recognition features as well as AI that can provide proactive support before a particular sound is heard.
They also asked how young could users be? Their daughter has misophonia and they are 9.
Yeah, so I've been working with kids who the youngest I want to say was 7. And so a lot of their feedback is they could see themselves using this app. But more specifically, we're also looking at how can we design something that's specifically for kids. But overall, with the current app that we do have, I do think if you're I would say 6 and younger, you could use this tool because I think sometimes we kind of think that some kids like it's hard for kids to adopt certain technologies, but like man, I give my phone to my 3-year-old little brother and he's like navigating it better than me. So I think like my goal was to design something that's very simple and basic in functionality so that even the youngest person could use it and find it helpful for their condition.
That's excellent. And I suppose the way that you designed that, what you just showed us on the screen with those emojis and things like that, means that it is just that bit more user friendly for all ages and all experience levels, and anyone who may have dyslexia or problems like that. It's more inclusive, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's as an accessibility researcher, one of the things is like thinking about how is this accessible in general. Because one of my things that I believe that if it's accessible for one, it makes it accessible for the general population. You think about street curbs. It was probably made for people who are in wheelchairs, but all of us find benefit and support, find it helpful for us. So I take that same thought process into designing this app, that if people who are neurodivergent or have other disabilities, how are they using it? And if it's helpful for them, it should be helpful for a lot of other people as well.
Perfect. We've had another question from Jack. He said, "Hi, thank you. Does pink noise actually rebuild sound tolerance, or is it just a myth? Any news on the Susan Shaw device?"
I'm not too familiar with that myself. I went through the interviews. I've had participants say that they use white noise, they use pink noise, they use gray. Like, I don't know exactly how those different sounds work per se, so I can't say if it's fact or fiction.
I think it also, like as you said, it depends on the individual. So some patients with sound sensitivity respond really well to um, pink noise, or like sound enrichment for help with hyperacusis. Some patients it doesn't, and it's the same with tinnitus as well. We often use these sounds for help with patients who experience tinnitus, and some of our patients absolutely love using sound enrichment, and some patients experience no benefit, or in fact, it can actually exacerbate their symptoms. So I don't think there's essentially any research that debunks that myth, because it is down to the individual. I'm not currently aware of the Susan Shaw device either myself, but my next question was going to be, what do your family think? Have they tested your device?
They have not, primarily because of just like I don't want to say necessarily ethical, but like the bias that can be there, right?
Yeah.
My little brother's like, I can't wait to test your app, and I was like, I can't either, but it may be a while. But I think overall, like they're really excited. Like whenever I'm talking about this, like, oh, so when is it gonna be like a full thing? When is it gonna be a full thing? And I'm like, so research takes a little bit of time, but I'm hoping that it's like soon it'll be a full-fledged tool that many people can use. But overall, like they're excited of the outcomes with this project.
And do they like that they were your inspiration?
My little brother loves it. He basks in it, yes.
That is brilliant. We've had another question that says, bit off topic, but I don't think it is. Did you encounter musokinesia in your research? So patients who don't like repetitive movements. My daughter reacts strongly to certain movements her dad makes, for instance, adjusting in his seat or moving his lips.
I don't think right off I haven't like I don't think I've encountered that specifically. Um, but it will be interesting to go back and like see like are there indications of that anywhere in my data. But as of current, yeah, no, I haven't
Not
had
in your
any.
research. In my experience, there is quite a large proportion of patients with misophonia who do experience some elements of mesokinesia as well. And vice versa, some patients who actually have more mesokinesia triggers than they do misophonia. They often are related to sounds as well. So it's the movement that primarily is the trigger, but there's normally a sound related to it. So, for example, moving lips, there's the worry that we're going to hear smacking of lips. clicking, like if somebody's like moving their, like juddering their legs, or like moving a pen, they're worried that they might be able to hear the clicking of the pen. So there's often an anxiety around the actual sound as well as the movement. But
Now
um
that about it, I do remember one of my child participants, his like he didn't like being around his parents when they got new packages from, like, let's say Amazon package. He didn't want to be in the room like when that, because he associated that with hearing a box being torn open or the styrofoam packaging rubbing together. So like they wouldn't even let him see them bring in a new package, because he would automatically know that, okay, that's going to be problematic, and he would not be okay with that.
yeah. Do you in your research, obviously you were looking primarily, you said obviously when you were talking about noise sensitivity, you were looking primarily at misophonia and hyperacusis. Do you know what the split was in terms of your research, and how many patients had misophonia and how many had hyperacusis, or was that information not available to you?
I don't necessarily know what the split is, but you're giving me ideas of things, like more specific things to kind of hone it in on. Because I think like even like some of the depending on like who the person was, like didn't necessarily have like the official language of saying this is hyperacusis or I have misophonia. In fact, I think maybe two of my participants out of the 20 or so that I've engaged with so far specifically use misophonia or hyperacusis in talking. But if I go back and look at how are they describing their conditions, you can probably attribute it to one of the either of the conditions. So I think it would be really interesting to see like what is that divide.
It's the reason why I ask is that in a one of our sessions for the patient education program, we discussed some devices, and there's a device in Europe, an app in Europe, but it's aimed primarily at like hyperacusis patients. So it will alert you to environments that are loud, essentially. But that misophonia element, that misophonia side of it, we can't sort of find anywhere that anyone that's looking at triggers rather than just noise levels. So I find that really interesting, and wondered actually whether there'd be more patients with misophonia sort of coming in the research, because those are patients who there aren't other supports out there for them.
Absolutely. I'll definitely look more into that.
We have another question. Have either of you found anxiety is present in some or most of those with misophonia? Do you think it could be a contributing cause?
I definitely have seen it in my participants where they'll say like, oh, this causes me anxiety, or I have anxiety, which impacts my noise sensitivity. So I would say like it's one of those things of like co-occurring condition, like they could coexist and one feeds off of the other, or one impacts the other. Would I say that one leads to the other? I don't know. I don't necessarily make that correlation, but I've definitely seen where with participants I've engaged with, they've reported having anxiety and the condition of noise sensitivity, whether they were neurodivergent or not. So I definitely see there's a connection there.
Yeah, and I think in my practice, definitely there's a connection in two respects. The first one being that with the neurodivergent population, that those environments that are really difficult. You were saying, Emani, that some people don't, specifically don't go to places like Disney World. In my experience, it tends to be things like the cinema, swimming, bowling, those big environments that are very noisy, where there's lots of triggering sounds. And with the neurodivergent population, there's also that social anxiety element with some patients, not with all. And so sometimes it's difficult to work out whether there's anxiety incorporated in there. Is it because specifically just because of the sounds, which for my job is what I'm looking for, or is it actually there's an element of social anxiety and other problems that we're navigating there as well? The other aspect of anxiety that we see is where, especially with patients who start to do CBT for noise sensitivity, and we start to look at managing triggering sounds, we find that patients actually, when they're triggered by this sound, they start to manage those triggers much better. But the anxiety about being triggered is almost then the actual problem that we're then left to deal with. So yes, it's very common to see anxiety related with noise sensitivity in many different ways. We had another question from Jack. I had misophonia since at least 4 years old. Now I've got tinnitus and hyperacusis in my 40s. There is an addition to that question, so hopefully that will come through. But I think, I don't know if you saw this from your research or your personal experience, Emani, but it can be quite common for patients to have several sort of sound sensitivities together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think amongst just my population, we're more so seeing all of it, a mixture of them all. Because like even when I was talking about with misophonia or hyperacusis, it often led to the phonophobia, where because they know that a particular sound is problematic, that it causes them pain, that it's intolerable, it typically would lead to the fear of that sound, to where they didn't even want to be around it because they were afraid of how it would impact how they're feeling. And so even as I think about trying to create solutions for hyperacusis or misophonia, it's so interwoven at times, depending on the person, that it's hard to say that this particular solution is going to support your condition. Because even if it's supporting the misophonia, you still have the hyperacusis or the phonophobia or the tinnitus. So overall, it's like trying to find one solution that fits all. It's kind of unlikely, especially when you go from person to person and how the condition manifests from person to person. So you kind of have to be a bit more strategic about how you're thinking about supporting the individual and having more personalized approaches per individual, even if you're starting from a basic framework or tool or system, and then just tailoring it to that individual person, because it can start as one condition and elevate into something else, or a mixture of all the things.
And that's what I liked about what you showed us on the app, is it was like, right, okay, this is a way of me writing down and sort of getting out how I'm feeling. And then these are some coping strategies. And you had some sort of mindfulness elements in there, some bits where you can take yourself away from the situation if that's what you need, different coping strategies for, all different situations. So that multidisciplinary approach essentially to looking at, okay, how can we tackle this, because it isn't a one size fits all answer, is it? And sometimes we need several different approaches, and that's what I say to my patients as well, is that, okay, well, sometimes actually you might need something else in this situation to help you with it, if you're really struggling. And so it's really good to have that all in one place.
Right. And definitely, as I think about that, because it's going to require, it's not just that one size fits all solution. We want to think about just the agency that we're giving people and choosing how they prefer to cope, and kind of going back to how I was talking earlier about the stigmas and the impacts towards social life because of how someone may perceive someone who's deciding to wear a headphone, or somebody who's stimming to help self-regulate. And so I think just as a society, as we create more awareness and more support for people with noise sensitivity, whether they're neurodivergent or they're not, there also has to be some education and literacy going on for the general public to be more mindful about how we're supporting people, so that it's not ultimately impacting their agency in deciding how they want to cope and deal with their condition moving forward.
I think that was a really important point that you made in the presentation about the fact that it's all on the patient, it's all on the person, that it's their responsibility disclose this information if they want to. It's their responsibility to seek treatment. And that is something that recurrently comes up in my CBT sessions. It's my problem. I'm the one who has to do this. And it's so frustrating for the patient sometimes, especially in those sort of home environments. And we work on that quite a lot, exploring the patient's thoughts about those situations. But is there anything from your research, anything that you think that we can do as people supporting loved ones to help support and improve those situations?
Yeah, definitely. I think first, just as a more practical and easily initiated step is just think about yourself in a sense of how am I contributing to the noise in an environment, right? So I think about like even me, like I'm not like overly noise sensitive, but if I'm in a grocery store and I hear someone talking on their phone and their phone is on speakerphone and I'm trying to process what I'm in the grocery store to find, that can become so intolerable. And I'm not even like I don't have hyperacusis or misophonia. So imagine the impacts, just my decision to be out in public on speakerphone or play my music out loud on a speaker in a fully public location, how that's impacting someone and how they're experiencing that space. So I think if one, we can just be a little bit more reflective of how we ourselves are contributing to the noise in an environment. That can be just one very practical and low-tech solution for helping people with noise sensitivity. But then also, we all have jobs. We all go to at some point have gone to school. I may have kids who are in school. Advocate for more sensory-friendly classroom sessions or more sensory-friendly spaces for kids who may have sensory differences so that they can have as just as an enjoyable school experience as the next person. Because let's be real, kids are already dealing with enough at school. We want to also make sure we're taking care of their well-being when it comes to sensory differences. So it may be going and saying, hey, can we have a classroom that's a low stimulant space where kids can walk out of their classroom if they're overstimulated to go and sit and what's the word I'm looking for?
Desensitized? No.
Yes, desensitize. That's maybe the best word. But having those spaces and even at your job, maybe considering the type of keyboard you use. Like I think that's like a simple solution because one of my findings was that for the adults in the workplace, the keyboards or the notifications on somebody's computer constantly dinging whenever they get an email. How can your work environment become more sensory friendly? I think those are ways that we can just think about supporting people with noise sensitivity where it's not on them to
Yeah.
be the ones to always find the solutions. But also, if you see someone who may be having a hard time, don't stare at them. I think that's very practical. Don't stare at them. Don't like pass judgment. If you feel that you are equipped to, maybe offer to help them. If they say they don't want help, respect that. So I just those are just some things I think about as one an advocate, but also just how I want my little brother and my cousins to be supported, that we can do to be more mindful and aware of how we can support people with noise sensitivity.
Do you think as a population that we are becoming more aware of sound, like sensory sensitivity in general?
I think to a degree, yes, but I think it's at a very slow pace. Like I feel like the awareness is moving at a slower pace than society is progressing. Because I think about even as more and more people are moving into certain places, it's going to cause environments to be more populated and more noisy. And so I think about there's like certain initiatives in the UK that may be more geared towards people with disabilities and supporting their sensory differences. You may have housing setups that are for people with disabilities and sensory needs that supports them, accommodates them, versus I think in the US, it's very low impact. Like it's not as progressed as I would hope and think it is. But I think part of that is due to noise sensitivity being an invisible condition. And so few of us taking on the charge to kind of support the awareness of this condition. So, but I think as we do more talks such as this and more research and more efforts to support noise sensitivity, I do think it can become a bit more widespread. It's just going to take a larger effort. And I think a big part of that will be due to policy and the policies that are put in place to support these particular endeavors.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's having other people sort of bring it to the forefront and not, on different platforms. I know that Richard E. Grant has misophonia for eating, like specifically eating crisps, and he's talked about that publicly. Noelle Foley as well. She's in the WWE. She suffers with hyperacusis, and she uses her social media platforms to spread awareness about this. So I suppose it's, people like that that are going to reach different spectrums of the population, that hopefully, this information will go further, which is amazing. We had another comment to say, this has been wonderful. Thank you both so much for the time you've put into your research, your work, and this presentation. And thank you for me, Emani. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm really excited, and I wish you the best of luck. Going forward with the rest of your research is definitely going to be something that I'm going to follow, because it's going to be incredible. If I could, give this as a tool for my patients, that would be amazing. So, best of luck, and I hope everything continues really well for you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions, and thank you for watching this evening. If you are having problems with any of the issues that we have raised today in our patient education program, please feel free to get in touch with HSO International. Our website provides lots of interesting resources for patients, families, and health professionals. If you need help and support, there are many resources available on the website. The main aim for HSO International is to provide private consultations and clinics, delivering specialist care for children and adults with misophonia, tinnitus, and hyperacusis anywhere in the world. We offer a primary therapy package which comprises targeted cognitive behavioral therapy for misophonia, tinnitus, and hyperacusis, combined with consultations with a multidisciplinary team of audiologists, psychologists, occupational therapists, and neuroscientists. Evaluated research on this package has shown very good results in helping patients to manage their symptoms and significantly improve their quality of life. Thank you for joining us this evening. Perfect. Thank you so much, Emani. I've ended the live stream. So the video is available on YouTube, and